If you have a family member who seems ever so nice on the surface, but something always feels off, this video is going to save you years of confusion and pain. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how to spot the mask and covert manipulation fast, so you never get played again. This approach is different from what most people teach, and I've seen it work for clients who've tried everything else, and suddenly, like magic, no more guilt or second-guessing themselves. Let's break it all down step by step, starting now. To start, I want to give you the lens that makes this whole process 10 times easier. It's something I teach my clients, and it's the very reason they stop feeling guilty and confused almost overnight. I call it the 3 truths framework. And once you know these 3 truths, everything else you're about to learn will make so much more sense. And it's simple. Truth number 1, the covert narcissist's niceness is a strategy, not a personality. Knowing this instantly stomps 80% of the guilt and self-doubt. Truth number 2, their reactions have nothing to do with you, only their own insecurity and entitlement. Knowing this puts an end to you internalizing their projections and taking on their emotions. And truth number 3, your power comes from clarity and distance, not from confrontation. Knowing this is what makes dealing with them begin to feel calm, grounded, and drama-free. When you use this framework, you no longer get pulled into their poor me story, and you stop trying to get them to hear you. You stop trying to fix them, and you finally see the patterns for what they really are: manipulation, designed to keep you confused, blamed, and shamed. This is the shift my clients make that begins to change everything. And I'm going to show you exactly how to apply it as we go through the signs and strategies. And now that you have this lens, everything else we're about to cover is going to click into place. Because once you see the truth behind their behavior, you'll be able to spot it fast and stay out of the trap. So let's start with the piece that confuses most people most. Why covert narcissism looks nothing like overt narcissism. To begin with, it's important to know that the narcissistic personality pattern actually manifests in varying degrees of severity and on a spectrum, a continuum. And people with this destructive personality pattern can present in many different ways. And the truth is, it's not always easy to spot destructive narcissism, especially when we're talking about a less known and understood subtype, such as covert or vulnerable narcissism. The thing to know up front is this: these people are master manipulators. Even the most highly trained clinicians will admit to being duped initially before being able to recognize what exactly it was they were dealing with. So don't be hard on yourself for missing the signs. They're quiet and subtle on purpose. They're designed specifically to cause you to doubt and second guess yourself and your experience. That said, the more you know what to look for, the easier it'll be for you to identify covert narcissism quickly, so you can save yourself the inevitable grief by either distancing yourself or removing yourself from the toxic dynamic entirely. Doing so will help you avoid unnecessary guilt and emotional pain, as well as protect yourself from being exploited and drained dry by this stealth and sneaky emotional manipulator. So let me show you how to know the difference between covert and overt narcissism. Covert narcissism is also referred to as fragile or vulnerable narcissism, and unlike your more overt or grandiose narcissist, people with this subtype tend to not outwardly demonstrate arrogance or entitlement. Rather than exuding excessive charm or confidence, covert narcissists will present as meek, timid, or shy. And they're often quite self-effacing. They'll come across as passive, demure, insecure even. And if you spend enough time with them, you'll notice they're often very anxious. The more high spectrum they are, the more hypersensitive they'll be, obsessed even, specifically with regard to their image and how others might perceive them. What others may be thinking or saying about them takes up a lot of their mental bandwidth. On the surface, they appear to be quiet, reserved, and sensitive. And they are especially sensitive to any perceived criticism. The mere hint of it, even if only in their own mind, is enough to cause narcissistic injury. And where there is narcissistic injury, you can be sure all kinds of trouble is soon to follow. While people with overt narcissism generally seek attention outwardly and put themselves forward as superior or grandiose one way or another, subtly or not so subtly, the message is always sent. You are beneath them. Unless, of course, they think being aligned with you in any way will somehow benefit them, enhance their image, or serve whatever agenda they might be running at the time. Then, of course, you'll be charmed. Either way, if you're paying attention, you'll notice patterns of manipulative and exploitative behavior that relates to an irrational sense of entitlement, egotistical delusions of grandeur, and an unusually high need for attention, admiration, and recognition. Covert narcissism, on the other hand, involves a more internalized experience. People with these traits still feel unappreciated, have a very high need for attention and admiration, feel contempt for those they consider to be inferior, and believe they're entitled to special treatment. But instead of displaying outward grandiosity, they're much more subtle, sneaky, childish even, and definitely passive-aggressive in how they work to manipulate, target, and exploit others. Where the overt grandiose narcissist is the disagreeable extrovert, the covert narcissist is the disagreeable introvert. Which leads us to our first clue that the problematic person in your family is indeed a covert narcissist. They live from a chronic victim state and mentality. Poor me is their ongoing mantra. One way or another, they'll be communicating the message of just how hard done by they are, how betrayed, how victimized, how used, abused, and harmed they've been, no matter the relationship crimes that they themselves have committed. And for a time, we may even believe and feel bad for them. Again, they present as reserved, meek, and shy. They're timid and work hard to project humility. False humility, that is, which they back up with an almost bizarre tendency to put themselves down. And this is where we're often duped, when the reality is, underneath that shy, reserved, seemingly humble facade is a great big overinflated ego. And this ties directly into our next clue. They're draining. Again, if you pay attention to how you feel when you're with them, you'll notice that your vital life force energy is literally being siphoned from your very being. You leave feeling emotionally and energetically depleted, contaminated to a degree, never uplifted or inspired. Which leads us on to the next clue. They're emotionally immature. When you are dealing with a covert narcissist, you are truly dealing with a highly manipulative, wounded toddler in an adult body, no matter how old they are or how hard they work to present themselves as good, kind, decent, altruistic even. And that is definitely one of the main reasons this subtype of narcissism can be difficult to spot. They initially present as having empathy, being good-hearted, kind, caring, generous people. But in truth, their tendency to be ever so helpful is always motivated purely by a desire for recognition and validation, as opposed to being from any sense of genuine kindness, generosity, or just out of the goodness of their own heart. And this leads to our next clue. They can also be quite smug, quiet and reserved, with an air of superiority, especially if they feel slighted in any way. And it doesn't take much. Say, for example, something you've done or said triggers their thinly veiled insecurity and deep feelings of inferiority. Or they suspect you may be onto them because you aren't buying their narrative. When this happens, they'll become silent and bitter and sulk, like the emotional toddler they are. They communicate passive-aggressively, rarely directly. For example, pouting, sighing, the silent treatment, and stonewalling. They're cowards. Ask them if something's wrong and they'll say, "No, everything's fine." even though it's very clear everything is definitely not fine. They can't just adult up and address the issue directly. It's always about the childish games. They're also big on perception manipulation, often through toxic gossip and storytelling, using truth out of context and putting their own spin on whatever narrative they're running with, all the while leaving out great big chunks of the truth, lest you figure out that they are the author of their own ongoing and never-ending misery and misfortune. Like all narcissists, they're pathologically envious. They believe they deserve what others have, the success, the attention, the admiration, without putting in the work, taking responsibility, or making a single change. They want the outcome, not the effort. And instead of doing what's required, they stew in bitterness, envy, and entitlement, convinced life owes them what they refuse to actually work for and earn. They also carry a lot of anger and can really rage when they don't get their own way. If they don't think they can get away with that, they'll just target you indirectly, behind your back, to vent their rage, but then smile nice to your face as if all is well. To say that you're dealing with an entitled, childish ingrate who needs the whole world to see them as a victim and feel sorry for them, no matter how poorly they've behaved, would be exactly right. Like their more grandiose counterparts, they lack empathy completely. They cannot genuinely feel, understand, or care about the impact of their attitudes, choices, or behavior have on other people. Your pain or discomfort, or how you've been inconvenienced or negatively impacted, doesn't register for them. Only their own experience matters. Now, comment below and tell me if you're struggling to deal with someone in your family with any of these traits. Let me know in the comments section below. Also, if you'd like to learn more about the possibility of working with me in one of my coaching programs, there's a link in the description below this video where you can apply to see if you qualify for a free one-on-one consultation with either myself or a member of my team. So now that you know how to identify a covert narcissist, how do we deal with them? Especially when we're talking about a member of the family. Well, the same way we deal with any other destructive narcissist. It starts with radical acceptance, meaning understand exactly who and what you're dealing with and learn to stay in your truth, in the truth of your experience, your reality, and not abandon yourself in the process. That is huge. Then it's important to have realistic expectations. The thing to know is these people do not change. The sooner you actually surrender to that reality, the better off you'll be. Now, once you've accepted the reality of the situation and you're operating from a place of realistic expectations, you'll want to start to practice the gray rock method. And if you don't know what that is, you can actually watch this video here to learn more about how that works. Suffice to say, your goal is to detach with as little drama as possible. The gray rock method teaches you exactly that by becoming as uninterested and non-reactive as humanly possible. From there, you stop engaging. No energy, no explanations, no emotional reactions. Narcissists feed on attention, any attention. So the moment you cut off the supply, you actually reclaim your power. Whatever you do, do not personalize their negativity or their distorted perceptions of reality. Understand what is their stuff and what is yours, and don't take on their BS. Stand in your truth with the intent to remain detached. Establish low contact or no contact if you can do it. The point is, keep your distance. And lastly, refuse to be manipulated. Do not allow their painful history or victim story to be an excuse for their destructive, entitled, and infantile way of showing up in the world. You aren't doing them any favors by giving them pass after pass while they continue to manipulate, exploit, and hurt you. Now here's the thing. When you start pulling away from a covert narcissist, they are going to pull the big victim card. For example, emotional manipulation, childish outbursts, rageful attacks, perhaps even threats of suicide. If they sense that you're getting ready to discard them, they'll become resentful, and one way or another, they are going to lash out. Now, usually they'll do this through passive-aggressive, covert behavior, not directly, unless of course they feel cornered, then look out. But in general, the covert narcissist is a coward. So you can expect passive-aggressive behavior while they smear you behind your back to anyone who will listen. This sort of thing is much more their style. As I said, these people do not change. Their maladaptive personality significantly worsens under stress or disappointment and the threat of exposure. So make no mistake, covert narcissists are absolutely just as dangerous and destructive as the more overt and grandiose narcissist. They'll just do much of the damage in more sneaky, underhanded ways because they lack the courage to confront you face to face, being the weak little cowards that they are. So your goal is to identify the traits, establish boundaries, and put some distance between you. The more the better, again, if possible. Have realistic expectations for who and what you're dealing with. Recognize that it's not your job to fix, rescue, help, or save them. Decide that you will not let their projections, their manipulation, or their victim stance determine how you feel about yourself. Do not fall for the BS, and do not allow them to gaslight you. This is what narcissists do, covert or overt. They talk to you and about you in such a way that anything that goes wrong is all your fault. And anything that they do or don't do is also all your fault. That, my friends, is one of the ways they attempt to gaslight us. You'll hear phrases like, "I didn't do that," "I'm not the one who's angry," "Why are you being so sensitive?" "Why are you so bitter?" "You always make a big deal out of nothing. What's wrong with you?" "You're not okay." And if you don't have boundaries, realistic expectations, and distance, as an empath, you will naturally start doubting yourself. Maybe it is me. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I am the problem. Don't go there. I'm not saying you're perfect. No one is. But not being perfect or flawless doesn't mean you have to take on the kind of crap a covert narcissist dishes out. They behave badly, appallingly, often downright cruelly, and somehow you're always the issue. I don't think so. Life is hard enough without all the extra. So be strong in the face of the mind-bending, crazy-making, manipulative nonsense. And if that's hard for you, you have to remember it is your responsibility to do your work and get the help and support you need to be able to stand in strength and truth and take good care of yourself. It's not because they're family that they get a free pass when it comes to hurting you time and time again. When it comes to dealing with a covert narcissist in your family, it only stops when you say it does, not a moment sooner. Now that you know how to deal with a covert narcissist in your family, watch this video next to learn the 10 super empath power moves narcissists hate.